Welcome to the Colin Cowherd podcast. Our NFL Draft Review episode is presented by BMW, where electrifying performance and versatility define both this year's top draft picks and the all-electric BMW iX. All right, John Middlekauff, former NFL scout. We do this every year, obviously. We go through the first-round picks, and let's not waste any time. Let's get past Cam Ward at number one. That was an easy one. The most interesting one, and boy, my phone blew up. Cleveland got a haul, I think way too much for a non-quarterback. So Cleveland gets 3 of the top 36 picks now. If you add all the picks they got in from the Jags next year, they're just doing that to get a quarterback next year. So next year, of the top 36 picks, Cleveland has 3 of them. They got a haul, and then they go down to number 5 and, getting a starting defensive tackle. I'll get to that in a second. But the GM for the Jags, who I was told actually worked from home in St. Louis a lot, even when he was a Rams employee, as a young kid. So this is the adult table being a GM. I don't like the swing. Travis Hunter's a great player, but unless he's a Pro Bowler on both sides of the ball, it feels like way too much to give up. And I think Cleveland was clearly doing it to get ammo for next year's quarterback draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the easiest trade that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski will ever make. They might have just got contract extensions from Haslam sitting behind them in the draft room. I'm with you. How can you make this trade, Colin, when you don't know your team? Part of anyone, whether you're taking over a football team, taking over a business, you got to let it settle and see what you have. Well, there's obviously no way. They haven't even been on the field in shorts and T-shirts. They don't know if their quarterback's any good. They don't know how talented their unit is. I get the ownership there is flush with money and aggressive and everything. But I think being this aggressive for Liam Cohen and Gladstone, the young 34-year-old GM, when they have never worked with the players on their team. It's one thing if you had been around for a couple years and you have a pretty good feel, like, we're a player or two away. Well, let's swing for the fences. That's insane, Colin, to throw away your next year's first-round pick. And I get it. He had a front row seat there for Les and Sean trading all those first-round picks over the years. They were typically a player or two away, though, with the Rams. So I thought it was, for a non-quarterback, I mean, we've seen the 49ers made one for Trey Lance. I think it's one of the craziest draft day trades I can remember for a non-quarterback.
I'm trying to think of the last time I got 3 texts from NFL employees, and all went mistake by the Jags. Like, all landed on the same spot. And this is a very young GM. And again, Travis Hunter is going to be a really sensational talent. There's no question. But there's also going to be some growing pains on the fact that he's not going to be in meetings for one side of the ball on a regular basis. So, and I mean, listen, this really isn't as much about the Jags as it is Cleveland. They're trying to get out from this tonnage of Deshaun Watson's contract, and the way to do it is get a star quarterback. I mean, that's how the Broncos got out from the tonnage of Russell Wilson. They got Bo Nix, who will be free for 4 years.
Yeah.
So, I didn't like it at all. I just think, we could always take shots at Cleveland, but I've always been a Stefanski fan, and I have people that really like Andrew Berry. I think this is a really easy deal to make. And then, by the way, you slide down to 5. Now, a lot of people think Mason Graham is more in the 8 to 12 range as a draft pick because his ceiling's low. And I think in most years, that would be fair. One of the people that loved what Cleveland didn't love Mason Graham as a number 5 pick. He said he's closer to 10 than he is to 5. But again, he's going to start, in that division. It's a northern division. It's a rugged division. Did you like what Cleveland did at 5 with Graham after making a pretty shrewd move to get all those picks?
Yeah, to me, the note that I wrote down, I mean, Travis Hunter for Cleveland doesn't do that much, right? I mean, they're several players away, and their quarterback situation is a disaster. When you think Mason Graham and you watch the way Michigan's played the last couple of years, obviously in that area too, ideal for the AFC North. Like that'd be my thing. Like, that guy is just made to play in cold weather against Pittsburgh, against Baltimore, teams that want to play physical, slow down the game. So listen, this is draft. I mean, McMillan went 8. Kelvin Banks went 9. I mean, this wasn't exactly Tony Baselli, and Myles Garrett coming off the board here right in this range. So I have no problem with going Mason Graham. to me, they could have taken me and you, Colin. The moment they made that trade,
Yeah.
Cleveland won the draft. They get next year's. To me, the likelihood of Jacksonville, first time head coach, young coaching staff. I mean, they could easily be a 5-6 win team. We do not know if their quarterback is good, and he has
Yeah.
struggled to stay healthy. And I get Liam Cohen had a big year with Baker Mayfield, but he didn't resurrect. Baker Mayfield was good the previous year too. That's how Dave Canales got a job. So it's not like he just made Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's now had two good
Yeah.
years in a row. So I think the Cleveland, again, could have taken anybody the moment they got the future one and the second. Think how often we see good players get drafted in the 30s. Happens every year, regardless how good the draft is. Because the same type player is there in the mid 30s. It can be impact starters that you get for like $1.5 million a year.
Yeah, and that's what, to your point, is Cleveland gets Jacksonville's first round pick next year. What's crazy about that is that could be a top 6 pick. I mean,
Easy.
that is nuts. Hold on.
We've seen it happen a couple years in a row where the Lions benefited the one year when they had the Stafford trade and the Rams had that awful year and McVay like thought about quitting football to go work at Amazon. They got they got the 6th pick that they turned into Laporta and Gibbs. We saw it the year when Denver was awful and Seattle got a really high pick and took Witherspoon. We have seen these future ones it's usually a player trade, Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford, whatever. But sometimes on a draft day trade, remember Chicago traded from 20 to 11 with the Giants, and then they were terrible the next year, and the Giants got multiple picks in the top 10. Now, you still got to make the right pick with that selection, but the amount of flexibility, if you let's assume Cleveland isn't going to be that good. I mean, their quarterback situation is a disaster. If I tell you next year they have pick 5 and 9. Like you got a lot to work with.
That's why they made the move. So, by the way, DraftKings, all odds provided by DraftKings, if we mention them during this our podcast, DraftKings had Ashton Jeanty plus 650 to get drafted number 6 and plus 475 to get drafted by the Raiders. This was a real obvious one to me, and I had mentioned this multiple times. Geno Smith with a run game, throwing on play action, is actually a pretty good quarterback. He's very Sam Darnold. When you gave Sam a little protection and a run game, and he can throw when nobody's quite sure he's throwing, he's very effective. When you force Darnold or Geno Smith to throw on 3rd and 11, or they have to throw it a beat fast, that's when you get the mistakes. I thought Jeanty, and I also wonder this, if you look at Pete Carroll's history, he's old school. Marshawn Lynch, Reggie Bush, Lendale White, his great teams have had stars in the backfield, which sets the table for his offense. Pete hates mistakes by quarterbacks, and Geno doesn't make a ton when he's throwing on play action. So I think Jeanty, I love that pick for the Raiders. Now for a segment called Power Players, brought to you by BMW, the ultimate driving machine. And the power player I want to focus on is running back Ashton Jeanty, who was absolutely electric at Boise State. He led the FBS in both scrimmage and rushing yards on his way to scoring 30 total touchdowns. And he was the runner-up for the Heisman. So in a draft class loaded with running back talent, Jeanty clearly separated from the rest of the pack with sort of a tough, versatile running style, paired with his ability to hit home runs, bounce off people. He's got all the traits of a superstar in the making for the Las Vegas Raiders. What is it that sets apart a power player from the rest? Bottom line, it's their attention to detail, innovative playing styles, and a relentless drive for performing at the highest level. The same goes for BMW iX. Everything you love about the ultimate driving machine, electrified.
I have been probably one of the counterculture movements here with this Ashton Jeanty like hype. I mean, people have been comparing him to Barry Sanders or, LaDainian Tomlinson. I think anytime that you compare a player to the greatest of all time, it's like when you're comparing Cam Ward to Patrick Mahomes, we got to tell you to pump the brakes. But listen, Kenneth Walker, who was picked later when he was healthy for Seattle with Charbonnet, their run game was good. Like you said, Geno was really, really good. My issue here is, like, I have experience in the Mountain West. I know the difference in the competition relative to the Big Ten and obviously the SEC. It is dramatic. Now, in an individual, like in a vacuum, he is a special talent, and he had the opportunity to surely go to Texas or Ohio State. He turned down money. So it wasn't like people didn't want him. But like playing against Washington State, New Mexico, Fresno State, and San Diego State is going to be a little different animal than the Chargers, Denver, and Kansas City, which you could argue is the best defensive division in the sport. We know Minter how good the Chargers are, so it's just going to be difficult for them. We saw this year. The Raiders' offensive line's okay, but it's going to be tough. I get it. I honestly thought they would go with a lineman there, especially a defensive lineman. Remember Pete Carroll over the years it hasn't always worked out. Bruce Irvin, I thought he would be aggressive there, but they swung for the fences. It gives them some star power. There's no disputing it makes them more interesting to watch because they were an unwatchable product the last couple of years. So Ashton Jeanty, Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, I'll pay attention. I'm not picking them to win that many games based on what we have on the roster.
So the Jets
right
go
now.
Armand Membu, offensive tackle from Missouri, who's kind of a physical freak. A lot of people thought he was the best offensive lineman. Listen, I thought the Jets would go for a tight end. They just have had no production in that area. But it should be noted, it's a good tight end draft and a good running back draft, so they can get that later. There's a story that Breece Hall is not happy. He's not content. He's on his social media, kind of doing some of those subtle shots, or he may be on his way out.
Yeah.
I think they're very much in their division weapon light, but I never really have a problem. I've been on this, John, for a long time. I think offensive lines are under-discussed. Of the top 8 last year, 7 teams went to the playoffs. And so I don't really have a problem with this. You can get tight ends and running backs in this draft. The Jets went and got their left tackle last year at Penn State. This is probably their right tackle. I don't have a problem with teams going O-line.
Yeah, I love this pick. I think when you look at their GM, he comes from Denver. Well, how did Sean Payton turn the thing around? They invested in the line. They already had a left tackle. They signed McGlinchey, which we can argue was an overpay, but immediately gives them a starter at right tackle. They sign a guard from Baltimore, and all of a sudden they had a legitimate offensive line. And who do they play? They play the Chargers. Well, they had Slater. Boom, you draft Alt. Last year, they draft the Penn State left tackle. He'll be their left tackle. Now you get the right tackle.
Yeah.
That's how you build a foundation. All I've seen is these GMs over the press conferences leading into the draft talk about the importance. The Eagles set the tone, the line of scrimmage, the line of scrimmage. And then sometimes the draft comes, it's like, let's take Loveland. Let's take Tyler. It's easy to do it. I understand it. And listen, I don't even blame them for doing it sometimes, especially the owner. It's much easier to sell guys scoring touchdowns than it is someone that just gets no stats. But last time I checked, no one ever complains when your tackles are good,
right.
In football. Especially, listen, Justin Fields, I don't know if it's going to work out, but you start to get, like, you already got Sauce Gardner, you got Garrett Wilson, you probably sign those guys to long-term contracts, you get a couple good offensive linemen, you already have some defensive linemen. You do have a lot of pieces on this roster, a little like the Bears a couple years ago. Just find your quarterback, get Caleb Williams. Obviously, they're not going to get Caleb Williams, but you know what I mean. Like, somehow you're in position. If you get a solid player at that position, all of a sudden you got a good team.
Carolina takes T-Mac, Ted McMillan, wide receiver, who turned off some people during the process.
Yeah.
He is known as a glider. I know Seattle also liked him. Seattle's not drafting here early. Seattle liked him, John Snyder. He's a lot of people think he has to be on the inside. The slot will be used primarily. He struggles to sometimes get off the line. He's been encouraged to change stylistically some of the things he does. Maybe he'll get better. He's young. I think he's got to be a little bit more coachable. I think this draft pick was honestly, because they went and got a tackle recently in a draft. I think last year, didn't they go get an offensive tackle, if I recall? I may be wrong on that. But I think this
2 years ago, they got the guy from North Carolina State.
I think this is about Bryce Young. I think they just want weapons. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, and I think their coach, who came from Tampa Bay, Mike Evans, similar measurements, tall, didn't run that fast. I think is the last guy to not run a sub 4.5 and get drafted, in the top 10. So you kind of use that as the blueprint. Listen, there are a lot of question marks on this individual. I would say he's one of the most polarizing guys discussed to be in the top 20. My issue from a football standpoint, not even counting some of the videos that came out, does he love football? Does he like volleyball more? Historically, guys that make great contested catches in college, that doesn't always translate to the NFL. It's about getting open.
Yes.
Like, can you just
Yeah.
consistently get open? If you need me to scheme you open, like that's the knock. It's why Loveland went ahead
Yes.
of Warren. Warren, you had to kind of scheme open. Now he had great ball skills and he's huge. Loveland's like a Kelsey type, right? He's a great route runner. He's quick. So to me, McMillan, they drafted Leggett last year, another big guy from South Carolina. So you got some big weapons. I do think Bryce gave them a lot of hope
Yes.
down the stretch. But I think this was a pretty
Yeah.
risky pick, which in a draft that's most people don't view as great. I understand
So
taking some
one
risk,
of the
but the love of football thing, Colin. You saw Jay Glazer's tweet. That's a serious thing, and the more and more money that's around, people get
Yeah,
scared
no,
off. With that.
he was without question. I asked every person I knew in the NFL about him. Totally split, but Jed Fish was his coach, and I think Jed Fish at times loved his talent, but I think Jed Fish, who has a lot of NFL experience and college. Jed's one of those college guys who's coached in the NFL with Belichick and Pete Carroll. I think sometimes Arizona was a bit frustrated. Not that he's not coachable. I kind of feel like with him, there's a sort of passive sort of, you saw the Booker get drafted by the Cowboys, and that guy might as well be doing somersaults coming down the hallway. And if you're a Cowboy fan, you're watching Tyler Booker, and you're like, damn straight, that guy loves football, and he's totally jacked up. T-Mac sometimes is a little cool for people, and I think that's a turnoff. Now, the Saints at 9 took Kelvin Banks, atrocious O-line, totally get it. By the way, Colston Loveland was plus 650 to be the number 10 pick. He's a very unique player. So I know the Rams and Chargers both liked him. The Bears obviously liked him. And even with Cole Kmet, they now have DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, Colston Loveland. They went and got Dolman, the center from Atlanta, Joe Tooney. They like their right tackle. I was texting somebody in the league about this, and one of the things we both landed at was the future of this franchise. They've never had a great quarterback. Is Caleb Williams. You have to make it work. The talent's there. And this is like weapons plus 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 plus. You have to make this work.
Yeah.
The NBA 82 game grind is done. Now the real fun begins. The NBA playoffs. Love them. They're here. Time for drama, clutch moments, Steph Curry, LeBron, jaw-dropping plays. I can't wait. If you're looking to make the playoffs even more exciting, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered. They're the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Playing games all the way to the finals. Now's the time to back your favorite players and teams as they chase glory. So all season long, DraftKings has been the go-to spot for NBA player props. That doesn't stop now. If you want to make your playoff experience even more intense, try placing a bet on your favorite player's performance. Will they drop 30, 40, who knows, or more? It's your call. If you're ready to place your first bet, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Takes 90 seconds. Lock in your bets, and let's make the playoffs unforgettable. Here's something special for first-timers. DraftKings customers that are new, bet $5. That's it, $5, and get 200 in bonus bets instantly. Just make it a playoff run to remember with DraftKings. Download their Sportsbook app. Takes 90 seconds. The code's Colin, C-O-L-I-N. That is code Colin. New customers get $200 in bonus bets. Betting just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours.
I don't remember a young quarterback on a second year of a rookie deal getting more help. They go outside Ben Johnson, who's, I would say, one of the more hyped OCs of the last decade. You mentioned, you forgot the Rams offensive lineman that they also traded for that Ben Johnson had coached in Detroit. So they get a new center, 2 new guards. They already had invested in tackles. DJ Moore is one of the more versatile players in the league. They invested the 9th pick last year into Roma Dunze. So it's like, if you're a Chicago, their defensive personnel is already good, and they have an established defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen coming. The hype that was behind the Bears last year I thought was crazy. I do think there's some substance now behind this. Now, I don't know if it's going to work. I got to let it breathe here for a month or two. But there is, legitimate pieces on the offensive and defensive line, a play caller that knows what he's doing, a defensive coordinator. Eberflus had to be the defensive coordinator and the head coach. He was completely over his head as a head coach, good defensive coordinator. Now Dennis Allen can just focus on the defense. Ben can just be the head coach / the offensive coordinator and really just focus on Caleb. To me, the question is going to be, and I think this is the working thing with all these young quarterbacks moving in the league. Can they teach them to get rid of the ball quicker and play in a more rhythm timing offense, run the ball more like they did in Detroit? Because, and the one thing they got going against them is the division's really, really good. So it's not like it's hard to win 10 games, especially a franchise that has not been winning. But I would feel much. I know the hype was so crazy last year behind the Bears. If I was a Bears fan right now, I would just feel like we have a real identity and team right now.
Well, and I also think if you go look at what happens at the end of the year, it is really hard, even if you have a great defensive team. Remember, statistically, defensive players get hurt more than offensive players. It's a more reckless side of the ball.
Yeah.
And so what if you start looking at the end of years, great Niner defenses 2-3 years ago can get carved up. Good Philadelphia defenses can get carved up. And my takeaway is, if you're like, Pittsburgh's got all sorts of defensive talent. The Bears are like, listen, historically, I mean, go over the last 15 years, they've had very good defensive players. If you're going to be heavy on one side of the ball, if you're going to make mistakes, if Roma Dunze is a mistake, it's the right side of the ball to make a mistake, not a safety or an off-ball linebacker. Like, I look at it and I think to myself, there are not a lot of teams in this league, John, that have Cole Kmet, Colston Loveland at tight end. And by the way, for a young quarterback, tight ends are a great ally.
Yeah, two things. We talk so much, the hype on Tyler Warren. I mean, his team, because Michigan was bad this year and Loveland had gotten injured, he became kind of the apple of everyone's eye. He's massive. Well, it's not like Loveland's small. He's basically 6'6", 250.
Yeah.
He's huge. How about Harbaugh as a talent evaluator? I mean, I think they sent a record last year for guys getting drafted in a class. They had an awful team this year. They had 3 guys get drafted in the top 13 picks, and 2 of them were defensive tackles. I mean, what? I mean, Harbaugh, say what you want. That guy can evaluate young men to play football. Holy moly.
And by the way, that's why when the Chargers, I remember talking to Dean Spanos about this. I said, you're going to get the next 2 years. You guys will draft as well as anybody because Jim recruited all these players. It was about the first 2 years for Pete Carroll in Seattle, probably the first 2 to 3 years, Pete crushed the draft. And then by year 4, 5, and 6, you just lose a connectivity to college football. But Harbaugh last year, great draft. This year will be a stupendous draft. And he's probably got them 1 more year where you recruited guys and saw them on tape. So, or had them on your team. Okay, so San Francisco gets Mikael Williams, the edge. That feels like now reportedly Jordan Schultz said the Niners did look to move up. So there was somebody they were looking at. Williams to me feels like best player available, best player on their board. Because before this draft, a lot of people, I talked to a couple GMs about this. Usually there's 16 to 18 what you consider can't miss guys or really first round talent. This year was about 12 to 13. So my take is Mikael Williams, it's just the best player on the board in their department or personnel department.
Yeah, to me, Jalen Walker, the other pass rusher who I think went to Atlanta at 15, was the better football player. This guy, though, is 20 years old. He started on their team that won the national championship 2 years ago that had basically every player on the team was a first or second round pick. He's a freak. I mean, he's 6'5", 270 pounds. Like Kirby now is what Saban was a decade ago, recruiting the best of the best, especially up front. So this is I texted around to a couple buddies in draft rooms. They said it's a little boomer bust. There's no disputing his physical attributes. I think he got banged up week 1, but his highlight plays over the courses of his career for Georgia, and maybe for San Francisco, you just look what Howie Roseman's done the last couple of years. When all else fails, just pick a player from Georgia, especially on the defensive line. You're going to be okay. So I like Jalen Walker a lot, but the knock on him is he was only 6'1". This guy's 6'5", 270. And I think they think he can get a little bit bigger so you can kind of move him around the defensive line to go with Bosa. I mean, listen, the bottom line, Colin, you're about to pay the quarterback $150, $175 million guaranteed. This guy's got to be good. And it's not like in 3 years, they're going to need him to have
Yeah.
an impact
Yes.
this year. That how'd the Rams all of a sudden get good
Jared
last year?
Verse.
It was like, and Fisk, like the two guys they drafted high were just impact guys as the season went. So the pressure on this guy. Here's what I do like though, and this is the Howie Roseman thing. Imagine the pressure you have as a starter for Georgia. It's like when you played for Alabama. It's basically
Yeah.
an NFL program. So these guys are used to the lights being bright, and the expectation is to win every game. So I got no issue with it. He's not 14 career sacks, but that's this draft. I mean, there's not J.J. Watt's not going pick 11 or Micah
That's
Parsons
right.
in this draft, right? So you just swing for the fences. I get
Dallas
it.
at 12 takes Tyler Booker. Zach Martin retired. Get it. The kid they drafted out of Oklahoma, the left tackle, looks very sketchy to this point. Listen, again, if it wasn't a great tight end draft, and every draft is a deep wide receiver draft. I mean, Iowa State's got two guys I like at receiver. So my
Totally.
takeaway is, again, this is a need. With a left tackle that's struggling, Zach Martin retires. I think Dallas had to go here. By the way, if Philadelphia is in your division, you're going 0-2 if you can't block them. Like, to me, this is a Philadelphia sort of kind of forces your hand on this. You have to be able to protect Dak because he's already had two injuries.
Especially when their best player is a defensive tackle, right? So, I'll say this about the Cowboys. Jerry takes a lot of shit for a lot
Yeah.
of different reasons. They have drafted pretty darn well over the last decade plus, and they've invested three straight first round picks on the offensive line. Right, a couple years ago, Tyler Smith, when Tyron Smith was kind of at the end of his road and was leaving. Last year, Guyton, they were drafting, later in the round because they had been a 12-win team, and then this year drafting a little bit higher. Some people think he's a guard, so he's never going to be considered like the best player in the draft, but like one of the best pure players in the draft. Like this guy's good. So if they can get Guyton, who was a little
Yeah.
bit of a project, coached up with Tyler Smith and this guy,
Yep.
they have put a lot of first round resources into the front to
Yeah,
protect that.
and I'll go back to it. Philadelphia is going to force your hand. I mean, look, don't be surprised if Washington doesn't load up on O and D line now that they have Debo and Terry McLaurin. You got to block Philadelphia. I mean, go ask Patrick Mahomes. It gets ugly fast with that team. And by the way, one of the reasons the Rams could hang with Philadelphia, they were good up front. It wasn't until the end when Jalen Carter burst through. But if you can't hang with Philadelphia, you can't block them. You're not going to compete with them.
Well, plus Schottenheimer's, his star had dimmed so much from 10, 12 years ago. He made his hay as an offensive coordinator as a running game guy, right? He liked to run the ball. I actually think I would expect the Cowboys in the second or third round. This draft's loaded at running back to take a running back, and I would expect them to kind of get back, to their roots. Schottenheimer coached for Pete Carroll and for Rex Ryan and was known as a run game. And remember, he gashed people with the Jets. They led the league in rushing back-to-back years. So I would expect, if not the second round pick, the third round pick, the Cowboys finally to take a running back in this draft. And obviously the emphasis is going to be coaching these young guys up on the offensive line because they've paid CD a bunch. They've paid Dak a bunch. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, you got to, when you're paying three or four guys 30, $40 million a year, you better nail some of your
Okay,
draft
Miami,
picks.
which does very few things I like. Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle, Michigan, can get really heavy, which always scares me. I watched 15 Michigan games the last several years. He was hot and cold. I thought Mason Graham was a much more dependable player, much more consistent player. I thought Graham was great against the run. Kenneth Grant's probably going to be a better pass rusher. He's a massive human being. I don't love a lot of what Miami does. It felt like the first pick in the draft, T-Mac to Carolina and Kenneth Grant to Miami. I look at Carolina and Miami, and I'm like, I don't love a lot what they do. What did you make of it? Fubo, as you guys know, is my favorite way to watch live sports. NFL, baseball, NBA, college sports. Baseball Masters around the corner. The reason I love Fubo, I can watch it at home. I can watch it in an Uber. I can watch it on a plane. And a lot of times I'm moving, like you. Go to FuboTV.com/Colin. Fubo, F-U-B-O. FuboTV.com/Colin to get $50 off 2 months of Fubo. I watch it 4 days a week. I mean, a classic example is, I'm going to an airport and a game starts and I've got a flight after my show Thursday. Well, I'm watching it in the Uber and then I'm watching it until I hit security. And then 4 minutes later, I'm watching it after security, waiting for the plane, on the plane. I mean, I can't carry around a flat screen TV.
I think Miami's in major trouble, Colin. I mean, I think they are on early watch for, I don't know, number one overall pick, but I think they're going to be pretty bad. I mean, won that division, the Bills kicked their ass. The Jets should just be a little bit more buttoned up this year and just they just have much better players top to bottom. Now, Tua's a better quarterback than Justin Fields, but we know the Patriots are going to be better. I mean, I think Miami's got a chance to compete for like a top 5 pick, and keep an eye. The McDaniel experiment feels like that's simmering out a little bit, and their owner always loves the big names. Remember, he chased Harbaugh forever. I could see John Gruden's name getting thrown around. I think this thing is going to be a complete what show this year. I listen, they're already trying to they couldn't give Jalen Ramsey away right now. He's making too much money, and clearly he was one of the guys. Mike McDaniel can't get people to show up to his meetings on time. Well, who's not going to show up to the meeting late? The guy's not making that much money. So it's not the majority of the team. Who makes the most money on the team? Jalen Ramsey, Tyreek Hill. Well, why do they want to trade Jalen Ramsey? He clearly is not listening to anyone in that operation. And the Tyreek Hill situation feels like it's unraveling a little bit. I think Miami's got a lot of problems. Weird organization. And that division feels just a little more stable now, definitely with Vrabel, in town. And the Jets are just going to be a little less noisy than they've been the last couple of years. So I got Miami on watch to be awful.
So once again, Chris Ballard is patient. Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State, who's wildly productive, plus 165 to go to the Colts. Again, all of our odds are provided by DraftKings. Last year they got the edge rusher from UCLA, the first defensive player taken, arguably the best pass rusher in the draft. This is great for them because many suspected, myself included, Warren would go in the top 12. So they're patient. He falls to them. He's a day one starter. I think this is one of the better picks. In terms of value, there's an argument that Tyler Warren is one of those 13, 14, 12 players who is considered a first-round pick. Every time I looked at people's evaluation of like clear first-round players, Warren was somewhere late in that list, but on that list, I like the pick by Indy. I really do.
Well, if I have inaccurate quarterbacks, I'd like a 6'6", 6'7" tight end for them to throw it to. So I think, listen, the main question for Indy has not been the talent on offense. I think, Jonathan Taylor, their offensive line's been good. Pittman's a solid player. Tyler Warren is just going to be a pro for a long time. Their quarterback situation, even Chris Ballard admitted the other day, he's like, yeah, these two guys, both are going to help us. Right. I mean, this is not college. Anytime you got to admit, like, yeah, we got a quarterback issue. I mean, they admitted it when they gave Daniel Jones, whatever, $14, $15 million. So I'm pro Tyler Warren, probably a pretty easy pick. Listen, I like Latu a lot last year. He did not have a great rookie year. And sometimes, technician guys, he got a bunch of moves where Jared Verse is like, I'm just going to run through you. It's like, I got all these moves. To me, Tyler Warren, he's a little more scheme dependent than Loveland, but Penn State this year with that Kansas OC schemed him up. Shane Steichen schemed back and schemed him open. So it's
great point.
Makes sense. To me, though, can their quarterbacks play, Colin? I mean, Anthony Richardson, would it be the most stunning thing in the world if he was traded the next couple of days? Probably not. I don't expect him to be, but like, and Daniel Jones, like they got problems.
I had somebody in the league in the personnel department tell me he could not remember a quarterback that was less accurate on stuff 10 yards and under. He could not remember that. By the way, there's some really good picks. Okay, so Atlanta, Arizona, Cincinnati, whatever. Seattle goes Gray's-Able, the guard, North Dakota State, which is a great football program. This is really interesting. Let's get to 19, Tampa Bay. So, I love the general manager of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Have I told you this before?
Jason Light, yeah.
They went and drafted Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver at Ohio State. I believe most general managers believe he is the best receiver or the only receiver to be a first-round receiver. I think the Texas kid is a late first-rounder. Everybody I talk to love him. And what's great is he can play sideline, but he didn't take that many snaps outside for Ohio State for obvious reasons. They're stacked at quarterback with Jeremiah Smith, or at receiver. They're stacked. They don't need sideline receivers. Yeah. He would be a sideline receiver or a slot receiver at any other program in the country, except like Ohio State and Alabama, because they have so many great players. So he'll come in and immediately play for them. I think he is a prime example, because he's not a burner, John. He's a prime example of maturity, interviews, professionalism that could have moved him up 10 to 12 spots. He was considered a second-round talent the minute the season ended. His value beyond being excellent is he is considered a mature, in a league where we're having wide receiver divas emerge like every weekend. I think his personality is a huge part of him going this high.
Well, one thing I remember the stat last year when the week 1 is that Tampa had like 43 or 44 drafted players on their 53-man roster. Jason Light has been, if not the best, a top 2 or 3 drafter over the last 5 or 6 years. And when you look, and the Baker that you originally started talking about back at Oklahoma is a completely different human being now. Tampa's got a really high-level team, from Wirfs to Mike Evans to Vita Vea. I mean, their guys on their squad are just like, honestly, Jason Light comes from New England, and I'm talking the Vrabel, Brewski New England days with Tom Brady. He's kind of built that version with Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. Super smart.
Steve Keim told me he thought Jason Light was one of the best scouts he'd ever followed. Keim told me, because Keim got into a discussion with me about 2 years ago. We're smoking cigars, and I said, "You ever notice every Buccaneers team is stacked? They just couldn't get the quarterback right before Brady." And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's Jason." He goes, "That he is as good a scout as we've had in this league." He goes, "He just didn't miss. He was so good." That's how you become a GM. You're a great scout initially.
Well, they built their offensive line from taking smaller school tackles and turning them into guards and centers. And obviously they've had Mike Evans to kind of settle, and Vita Vea as like stalwart players minus, separate from Tom Brady. But yeah, I mean, you tell me he could have drafted anybody. I'd be like, yeah, I like the pick. Now, like you said, I mean, this guy, didn't he set records at Ohio State for yards, catches, games? I mean, he's a stud. The other thing is, when you go to a team that has, I mean, they re-signed Godwin. They got him on a cheaper number because, remember, he shattered his ankle. Obviously, they still have Evans. This guy, the pressure on him they're not going to need him to catch 70 balls next year. Their running game last year with Bucky Irving, I mean, their team, honestly, they, in a weird way, underachieved because they had so many injuries the second half of the season on defense. They couldn't stop anybody. To me, if they are healthy, there's a pretty big gap in that division if they're healthy, like between them and the number 2 team. Like, the only reason it was close between them and Atlanta this year is because they had a million injuries on defense. But like, they're a much better run organization. What Baker's turned into, there's no disputing Baker's really become the last 2 years a top 10 quarterback, and clearly just his maturation, like a lot of us guys, the late 20s, it kicks in. He gets married, has a kid, and he's a different guy. And as a player, he plays much faster, slimmed down. His arm's always been great. And now he's got 3 with Egbuka, with Mike Evans and Godwin. I mean, and running backs and a good offensive line. I mean, their offense should be really good, Colin.
You get to a part of a draft. Atlanta takes Jalen Walker at 15, Arizona Walter Nolan, Ole Miss at 16, Cincinnati Sherman Stewart, the edge, and then Seattle Gray Zabel, into Tampa taking Emeka Egbuka. This draft was considered about a 13-player first-round draft. We have first-round talent. So all of these other guys are, they're considered guys that aren't significantly better than the 36th pick. But I will say, because of the position Emeka Egbuka plays, because of the quarterback he plays with, that he may be the most highly productive player taken out of that top 13 picks. I would be surprised. I mean, I was talking to former Raider GM Tom Telesco about him recently, and he just said, you can't not like him. If you watch him on film, you can't not like him. There's nothing. The routes, he's just there's everything about him. And you watch him on tape, you're like, oh, that's a slot starter in the NFL, who, by the way, can play on the perimeter. It's just Ohio State's so damn stacked, he's not going to do that for them. Sorry to interrupt this great video, but please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video.
Well, think about this. At pick 19 and pick 8, 2 wide receivers were drafted, right? If you had to invest or bet on one guy, there's no question the safer pick is, Egbuka at Tampa Bay. I mean, at 8, McMillan, yeah, he could be good, but would it shock you at all? We've seen a lot of those type players underachieve. So I wouldn't be stunned if you told me that Tampa, if they had the choice between those 2 receivers, they might have just gone with Egbuka.
Right.
Right. And I bet there were a lot of teams in the top 20 that weren't necessarily going to take a wide receiver, but felt much more comfortable with the player. And listen, these GMs now, I think, have really talked about it the last couple of years. Most of these guys don't fail because, they can't catch or they can't do something. It's because of the human being, the work ethic. They don't work as hard. They start getting lapped by other guys that want it more. There's intangible stuff that you can scout all you want, but you don't really know till you get the guy in their building. That's where Egbuka, I know Jalen Walker, the guy Atlanta got, like their character was elite, special. So anytime you get those type players with the talent, they usually at minimum become really, really good players. And on the flip side, I'm pro Mike Vrabel and the Patriots, and they were in a tough spot, but the Will Campbell pick reminds me a little bit when the 49ers took Solomon Thomas. You meet these guys and you're like, we just love this guy. We just love this guy. But when you draft a talent that's like, we don't love him at 4 or 3, we'd much rather get him at 12. Sometimes that's where you get in problem. And Solomon Thomas is going to have a 13-year NFL career, but he didn't get a second contract from the Niners. And that's the thing with Will Campbell. His character is just elite. But as a player, again, he's multiple year starter in the SEC. Sometimes, the character can sway a team instead of taking the more talent. Like, I don't think anyone in the NFL would tell you that Membu possesses more physical gifts than Campbell, right? But there aren't any questions with Campbell in terms of he's a pro already, right, last week. So and that's the hard part about the draft.
So the Denver Broncos, many of us suspected they'd take offense for Bo Nix. They went and got, across from Patrick Surtain, they went and got the Texas corner, Jahdae Barron, who many runs better. So by the way, Will Johnson at Michigan now has not been drafted yet. The concern with him is he ran over a 4.5. So Barron's an interesting corner because the belief is neither one of the top corners in this draft are burners, but Barron's a guy that does everything well. That's what I kept. If you look at his draft preview, that he again played against elite competition, played against great receivers, has gone against SEC, has gone against like Ohio State level players, and Barron's just a guy that doesn't make a ton of mistakes. As a former NFL scout, does that translate? I mean, again, this is not a draft where you've got 4, 3, 5 corners. There's just it's Will Johnson and Barron are not considered burners.
Yeah, to me, I think Will Johnson, I thought coming into the year was like a top 10 pick, and then he got banged up. He's more of a zone corner, but I think he's good. Someone's going to get him late. If he ends up to the Eagles at pick 32, I'm just going to fall out of my chair. But I think the thing with Barron is nickel corners or guys that can play inside are viewed much stronger now than they used to be because so many teams run 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. So anytime that I get a guy that I can move inside and out and that will tackle, that's the other thing with Barron. He's like this versatile chess piece that will tackle. So if I'm going to play inside, I'm taking a linebacker off the field. I need to be a run support player. Where I think Will Johnson, he is just, an outside corner, right? And that's all he does is an outside corner. But I'm telling you, Colin, that guy, I thought 2 years ago on the national championship team, he's like their best player on their team. And this is where I think we got to be careful about he runs a 4.52. But if you run a zone scheme like Fangio or what Robert Saleh does, this guy will make plays all day long. So I think sometimes these teams, they get that number, which I understand, but I think that sometimes it works out better. I mean, this guy's going to end up on a playoff team. So it helped. So did Barron. Both these
Okay,
guys.
so the Pittsburgh Steelers obviously at 21 are on the clock, and many suspect they're going to go get Shedeur
Sure.
Sanders. It's funny. One of the things about Shedeur Sanders that I hear, and I don't understand it. It's as if people didn't watch him play. This idea that he is immobile. Well, I thought he was a more mobile quarterback than C.J. Stroud, who is more than mobile enough. Now, I mean, again, you'd like Jared Goff to be able to move better. CJ Stroud can move when you need him to move. We saw that when he was a Buckeye against Georgia. We've seen it in the NFL. When he's flushed out of the pocket, he's fine, and he's accurate when he moves. This idea that Shedeur Sanders can't move, they had arguably as bad an offensive line as any of the top 10 quarterbacks that'll get drafted in this draft had. I mean, if you go look at Syracuse O-line or Notre Dame's O-line for Riley Leonard or Cam Ward's O-line, Shedeur had easily the worst O-line of all these players. Jalen Milroe's O-line was better. Jaxson Dart's O-line was better. I think Shedeur Sanders, that criticism of him, he's very stationary. It's like, then why, when I watch them play, he was almost always on the move.
Yeah, I think people probably aren't fairly comparing him to his dad. I mean, they've all admitted he got the genes from his mom. I just look Pat Mahomes, who I think of the top guys, right? Josh Allen's faster, obviously Lamar, Herbert. Joe Burrow's not viewed much more like a pocket quarterback, but of the top 3 or 4 guys that are mobile, Pat Mahomes is viewed as the slowest. Yet when you watch him, he has such an instinctive mobility that he's a really good scrambler. He ran a 4.8 40. Now, no one runs the 40 anymore for some reason. To me, Shedeur is running 4.75, 4.8. Mahomes moves more than well enough, right, in the NFL. I put Shedeur that way. Like, you're not going to run zone read plays like you would for Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray for him. But I'm with you. We're not talking Kirk Cousins here in the pocket. Like, he's just not his
Okay,
father.
so the Steelers, they love defense. Derek Harmon, Oregon defensive tackle. They do not go for a quarterback. So, I mean, Pittsburgh cracks me up. So listen, I'll give him credit. They reached on Kenny Pickett. So I had a GM tell me, a Super Bowl winning GM tell me they had Kenny Pickett as a high to mid third level quarterback. They saw him as a backup or as an occasional emergency starter. So Pittsburgh needs a quarterback and they're passing on Shedeur Sanders. I got to believe Shedeur doesn't get drafted in the first round.
Yeah, I would say it's very much in doubt as we sit here right now. I would say this, though. I would put Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett in the same little group. Historically, those guys are third and fourth round picks that were drafted 15th and 20th. I would say Shedeur Sanders is a better prospect than both guys. I do think, though, the NFL, maybe it's just because of this draft. Obviously, last draft, so many teams acquired quarterbacks. We still have a lot of guys between 26 and early 30s in the prime of their career. So we actually have a lot of teams that don't necessarily need quarterbacks and have highly paid guys. I think Shedeur is a better prospect than some of these guys that have been drafted high in recent memory. But I do think these teams are getting away from, like, historically we could find starters in the second and third round. Let's get back to that. Let's just take this guy at pick 45. And I also think getting picked at pick 45 is like you're some loser. I mean, you look at the history of the league. I mean, we know for a fact on a given year that typically it's like 48 to 52% guys in the first round will not have their fifth year option picked up. This draft is not viewed as great. So if we just kind of skew it a little bit more, there's a chance that, 4 out of 10 guys in this draft class in the first round will have their fifth year option. So 60% of the guys won't have their fifth year option picked up. So a lot of starters in this draft are going to come the second, third, and fourth round. And also when you fall, sometimes that works out to your benefit. Like Cam Ward, interesting prospect, going to a pretty terrible team. It's probably going to be pretty tough, right? We've seen Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Now, he might have been overrated or whatever, but his career has not gone well. And we see some of these guys that get drafted a little bit later, it's like you get to go to a pretty good spot. So, yeah, I mean, unless you don't think the Rams are going to take him, do you?
I think the Rams would go with Jaxson Dart over Shedeur Sanders.
I think a lot of teams have Jaxson Dart over Shedeur Sanders.
No, listen, the Chargers are now on the clock as we do this. As if you're listening to this, we started this about pick 13, 14, because by the end of the first round, we want to get this puppy out to you as fast as we can. Listen, I think one of the things about this draft that makes it particularly interesting, A, it's a weak draft, and B, most, and this is always the case, the better teams are at the end of the first round, but the better coaches, the offensive guys. I mean, you start looking now, you got Sean Payton at 20. You've got Jim Harbaugh, Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell's coming up. Um, Here comes Sean McVay, John Harbaugh, um, Andy Reid, Nick Sirianni. This is the rare draft, John. After about, I mean, honestly, after the Bears pick at number 10, because I was really interested, partly because I'm moving there. But I think where the draft really starts getting interesting is kind of right now at 22, because we know Harbaugh is going to draft much better than the average coach in this league and organization. And most of your really respected offensive coaches are not drafting at the top of this draft.
No.
Yeah.
But and here's the other thing, Colin. Think about last year. So a lot of these teams that are drafting here in the mid to late 20s played in the playoffs, late in the playoffs, won the Super Bowl, obviously. The Chiefs, they drafted Xavier Worthy high. What did Xavier Worthy do down the stretch? Made a lot of plays. The Eagles drafted Mitchell, the corner from Toledo. What did he do? I don't know, just started all season long for them, and it was one of the better rookie corners. You know, the Bills drafted Keon Coleman. They're going to need a little bit more for him next year. The Lions drafted Arnold, the corner from Alabama last year, starting corner for him. I mean, these are guys, these are 12 to 14, 15 win teams that we're all watching Sunday Night Football. And then obviously in January, the guys they pick, whoever the Rams pick, whoever the Chargers pick, whoever the Ravens pick, more than likely these guys are going to be starters on double-digit win teams that have a chance to win the Super Bowl. So for as great as a pick as Travis Hunter is, like, he had one of the most remarkable. I mean, think about it, Colin. He had one of the best 6 months we've ever seen. He literally played both ways, Division I college, won the Heisman. He had a team trade multiple first-round picks to move up 3 spots to draft him. We'll probably never see that again. Yet, more than likely, he's going to be like a 5 or 6 win team. And by October, I would say by Halloween, you and I will have him in a little screen down the bottom of the left of one of our televisions. Stop paying attention to him. Yet whoever the Rams take or whoever the Lions take, Chris Collinsworth is going to be calling those games on Sunday Night Football with 25 million people watching.
If you look at the draft so far, there's only 2 players that I believe can turn losses into wins. Cam Ward at Tennessee replacing Will Levis. If I told you they won 4 more games just simply because of significant upgrade at quarterback in that division, I think we both go, yeah. I mean, Cam Ward to Will Levis is a D to a B. And the other player that I mean, this draft is not exceptional. I do think Ashton Jeanty will be a pretty spectacular player for the Raiders. And with Chip Kelly's brain, Brock Bowers, Geno Smith, this is not a draft where people are changing outcomes. Then Jayden Daniels changed outcomes. We thought Caleb Williams would. Bo Nix changed outcomes. I could argue that Tennessee and Vegas will be, because of their first-round players, would you agree, noticeably more dynamic offenses in an offensive league?
Yeah, I think there's been one team minimum from the top 5 that has made the playoffs over the last 5 years. And, I remember when the 49ers had the number 2 overall pick and they took Bosa, and then all of a sudden they had a 13-win team and they were in the Super Bowl in 2019. I don't know if there's one of those teams here, but I'm with you. I mean, they lost Josh Jacobs last year, the Raiders, and their running game was a joke. I mean, they were in bad shape as an organization. So anytime you get a guy that is that good, but like I said, going from the Mountain West, he's a fantastic prospect and a fantastic. His tape this year looked like a high school kid going to Nick Saban in his prime, but it's a pretty big difference. I mean, their division is really, really hard. And, Cleveland, I think, is cool with setting back. I do think there's a lot of pressure on Will Campbell. He is a guy that if we assume that the Patriots are going to be a viable,
Yes.
low, like kind of like Denver was this year operation, they're going to need Will Campbell they don't need him to be Trent Williams, but can he just be a starter, a solid player that you can kind of rely on immediately? There's going to be, listen, the arm length thing, people push back, but it's I know it's crazy to sound like an inch is a make or break deal, but historically, it is difficult out there on edge. Think how many teams now have good pass rushers, right? Like the Jets have a good pass rush. We know the
Well,
Bills
think about
have
this. Think
multiple
about the
rushers in
pass rushing
AFC.
position. Think about the two positions in football that feel significantly better than 10 years ago. Tight end is now no, it's not just a blocker. Tight ends now are vertical.
Oh, yeah.
And edge rusher. Well, they're both 6'5", 245 to 250-pound athletes. There's just more of those. God, if you watch Major League Baseball, how many pitchers are 6'5"? I mean, how many guys throw 98? We've had this explosion of big athletes, often with dads that were former pro athletes. And these guys are ending up a lot of the time at tight end, doing stuff like Brock Bowers and Colston Loveland that you just didn't see tight ends do. You can split them out wide. They can beat corners down the field. And then defensive ends and edge rushers. There's just so many athletic guys now on the edge.
You see that?
Okay, the Chargers select Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina. Okay, so this is interesting. So I went to dinner with Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. I think it was on Friday night.
Yep.
And, he's not going to give me any intel, but we really talked a lot about football and what the team needed. And I wasn't going to pry information. But the one thing that we agreed with, I said, I wouldn't be shocked if you guys didn't go tight end, running back, interior offensive lineman, wide receiver. And, Greg acknowledged, he goes, listen, we got good players, but we probably need a little juice. We probably need a little bit more juice. And that's that. And I said, do you like Colston Loveland? He's like, everybody likes Colston Loveland. Do you like Hampton? He goes, everybody likes Hampton. So, I mean, this to me, Najee Harris and Hampton, okay, now with Joe Alt last year and Rashawn Slater at left tackle, John, this is a Jim Harbaugh football team. I picked them to win their division this year. This is a Jim Harbaugh football team. Between those two picks, a power running speed guy, Najee Harris, by the way, similarly. Now, he didn't have the burst of Hampton, but Najee Harris is a power running back. I mean, even last year, J.K. Dobbins, who's got some girth to him, got some size. This is really starting to feel like a Jim Harbaugh team.
Well, if you had to bet right now who's going to have the better career, Omarion Hampton with Harbaugh, who's I think going to retire as the Chargers coach, and Jeanty with the Raiders situation, you would have to bet on Jim Harbaugh and his running back. So, I think a lot of teams in the league thought that Omarion Hampton was a big-time player. Now, Jeanty got all the buzz and all the hype. This guy's a stud, Colin. They gave Najee Harris some money. I mean, think about the discussion when DK Metcalf was on the block that the Chargers are going to go trade for him. It's like, guys, I never understand these people making these guesses about what Harbaugh is going to do that is just so different from what he's done for 15, 20 years. Offensive linemen, running backs. He'll take another linebacker. I mean, it's the way he builds his team. They're going to be good. I mean, it was pretty clear last year with Denver and with the Chargers. That was going to be the worst version of those two teams for Sean Payton and him moving forward. That's why the pressure on, Veach and Andy feel it like we got to keep nailing picks. We got to keep being good because these guys are coming. And listen, I'm not trying to be a Raider hater here. They're going to be better, but from a roster standpoint, to me, they're clearly the fourth operation.
So if you look at what they have now, they have their quarterback in Justin Herbert. They have their left and right tackle, Slater and Joe Alt. They have Najee Harris, who was clearly underutilized and undercoached in Pittsburgh. I mean, he even admitted, Najee Harris acknowledged, we didn't really have an identity in Pittsburgh, which they don't offensively. Now you've got Hampton, the breakaway runner, and Najee Harris, the power runner. The offense now they're going to go interior O-lineman, sideline receiver, and tight end. At some point in this draft, that's where they're going. It feels like to me this is one of the more predictable teams in the draft because the defense, let's face it, last year it overachieved, or at least achieved to the level it should have with Brandon Staley. I think the Chargers, I think everybody in the ballpark knows that Greg Roman needs juice, and he just got a powder keg of it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Greg Roman a decade ago with Frank Gore kicking everyone's ass. And that Harbaugh team, their best receiver was Michael Crabtree. And I think we all believe that Justin Herbert has a chance. I know he had a really bad playoff game. Peyton Manning had a bunch. I mean, so the NFL, you don't get a 7-game series. So you have a bad playoff game, it leaves the stink in everyone's mouth. Do you want to sell Justin Herbert stock? I'll buy some. I would imagine Greg Roman says, like, we like this quarterback a lot. And I don't blame him. So I think the Chargers, listen, I mean, if I was a betting man, I would say that Jim Harbaugh is going to end his coaching career as a Super Bowl champion. Now, it might not happen in 2025, but they are going to be a major, major factor, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL, I think over the next several years. I mean, this guy is basically 6 foot, 225 pounds, ran a 4.45. This guy's a stud. I mean, this guy, part of when you draft this player, he's going to be with the nucleus of Alt and Slater and Herbert now for the next 5-6 years. Like, this is part of that nucleus with some of the guys they drafted last year. And to me, if Najee, for a while, he got overdrafted,
yes.
Looking back. He's a first-round pick, but he's not that good. But he's a good role player, and I think sometimes in Pittsburgh they were very dependent on him. Now he just gets to be a role player for Jim Harbaugh, who will mix these running backs in with Greg Roman, and they will run the ball down your throat. They're going to play defense and run the ball down your throat. He's been doing it. I mean, he probably wished he could have done it when he was a quarterback, and he's been doing it ever since he was a coach. So I couldn't be any more bullish on the Chargers. Least shocking pick so far of the night.
All right, John, they held the draft in Green Bay. There's 250,000 people there. It's absolutely magical looking on television. It's incredibly gripping. And, I really believe this to be true. I think there are certain cities in America, and Green Bay is one of them. Buffalo, obviously, the Buffalo Bills. Baltimore's got to feel like this. They're not as flashy, and so I think there's a feeling in the building that you do have to work harder and smarter than other teams. And like Miami. I mean, look at the NFL right now. Miami's a mess. Both New York teams are a mess. Chicago's been a mess for a long time. I think sometimes, Dallas, I would argue, does not have anything resembling a top 10 roster. I think a lot of times, somebody told me this years ago, be careful who you draft when you live in port cities, like New York, New Orleans, Miami, San Francisco, LA. There's just more to do. Port cities have, really cool areas. They're livelier. But I think Green Bay is really a testament, because it's the smallest North American sports market, is that I certainly believe they're on a short list. If you told me who is drafted better than anybody over the last 25 years, Green Bay has to be on a short list. First of all, they never take offensive linemen in the first round, yet they never have bad offensive lines. In fact, they overwhelmingly don't draft offensive players in the first round, and yet they almost always have more productive offenses than the league average. Well, that's drafting and developing. And you whatever you think of Jordan Love, there's no question he has first-round talent. Now, can he stay healthy? Can he be more consistent? But, I mean, I look at Green Bay, and I love what the NFL is doing, because I went to a couple of drafts in New York. It was fine, but everything's hard in New York. Everything. The Super Bowl was hard. The drafts are hard. It's just, if you ever end up in New York during UN week, forget about it. I mean, just forget about it. But it's just, I look at Green Bay, and I think they selected, by the way, Matthew Golden, wide receiver, Texas. So that's interesting. They feel Christian Watson can't stay healthy. This is a really interesting pick. I wonder if this is just best player they had from their scouting report, because we like their wide receiver group. We really like it. But the truth is, because Watson can't stay healthy, there's a feeling that they've got a bunch of 2s and 3s and they don't have a 1. Or is this signaling one of their young receivers was really inconsistent? And I'm wondering if this is a sign they may move off one of their young receivers, or is this a we don't have a number one? Because I love Watson, big.
Towards ACL.
And so my take with them, Green Bay, is he's very likely the best player on their board.
I mean, this was a guy that was discussed to go in the top 15. I think when you look at Green Bay, you lose Watson to the ACL injury. Dobbs is wearing the concussion cap, and he got a concussion to end the season, which was several. I think I liked Wicks, but he wasn't the most productive relative.
Very inconsistent.
I think the one thing that makes the Packers pretty special is most teams, just like most companies, once you get to be $1 billion operation, you kind of cycle from outside. Like Starbucks needed a new CEO. They hired the dude from Chipotle. The 49ers, when they were looking, they went and got Kyle Shanahan from Atlanta and John Lynch from Fox. The Green Bay Packers, once Ron Wolf took over in, I think, either late 80s or early 90s, Ted Thompson had worked for that organization for like 30 years. And he became the general manager like 15 or 20 years in. Gutekunst, same thing. I think Gutekunst has been in the organization since the late 90s. So they speak the same language. It's like when Steve Jobs to Tim Cook, it was like under the same umbrella. That never happens in the NFL. Usually, once I fire everybody, the Jags, I hire 2 new people from 2 new places. So you get all these different philosophical beliefs. This guy has a mentor. This guy had a mentor. All the mentors in Green Bay stem back to Ron Wolf. It's like, the one thing with the Walsh guys, they're all different places, but they're all fundamentally driven by Walsh to Holmgren to Andy. It all kind of broke down that way, but they were all different organizations. The scouting in the front office never left Green Bay. They went from Ron Wolf to Ted Thompson to Gutekunst, who were all in the building as they transitioned. That's unheard of. It's kind of unique. I mean, Howie Roseman's been with the Eagles for 25 plus years now. That's not very normal. This is a nomadic profession. It's kind of crazy that Sean McVay and Les Snead have been together as long as they have. That doesn't happen very often in the NFL. Oh, look at the Giants. They're running through coaches and GMs. The only reason they didn't fire everybody because he felt kind of bad that every couple of years he was firing people. But I think the Packers, in terms of stability, have a pretty special thing going. It's why back to the Rodgers thing, and same with Devontae Adams. It's like, I don't know if you guys realize how good you have it here. Is it perfect? No. But is it better than 90% of the league?
Well,
Hell yeah.
let's be honest. Look at Aaron's career since he left. It's a mess. It's kind of embarrassing. Yeah, it's embarrassing. Like, forget the injury. He's needy. He's kind of he's disinterested. I mean, his career has been, he's more, I think of him in human terms more than football terms. I don't even think of him as a quarterback. I just think of him kind of now as a personality. And it's like, that's when you're done. Yeah. So, and I also think I used to call it the Green Bay quarterback syndrome. It's a pretty easy media. It's a small market. You can't go to the grocery store. You can hide in a lot of these cities. Like in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, you put a cap and glasses on. You put a hoodie on. You can walk in and out of places pretty regularly. Green Bay, you can't. And I do think it wears on you a little bit. Like you are so, there's no owner to hold you accountable for stuff. You can, Aaron Favre were taking passive aggressive shots or aggressive shots at the front office. You don't have an owner to tell you, hey, stop it or we'll move you. So I do think it's different, not difficult. It's different to be a quarterback in Green Bay. But here's what's not difficult. They never have bad O-lines. They don't necessarily have a number one receiver, but you always have good weapons. Green Bay's always furnished people with good weapons. The knock on Green Bay has always been, hasn't it always been, God, the defense should be better. We always like their personnel more than their productivity. But
and their defense improved last year because they hired Jeff Hafley. And now it felt like, the offense in a weird way let them down, which was kind of understandable because they had so many injuries at wide receiver. The quarterback got hurt in the first game, and his season was just kind of weird. But he showed some flashes, but it wasn't quite as high. But you believe in LaFleur. Jordan Love, I'd still, buy stock in that situation. Josh Jacobs is one of the best running backs in the league. And to me, defensively, I think last year they were not good in the division. They lost to Detroit. I'm pretty sure that they went, which is pretty crazy, that they went 1-5 or something in the division. I'm pulling it up right now. The Green Bay Packers, they went 1-5 in the division, Colin. So think about that. The Green Bay Packers won 11 games and they won one. They lost a game to the Bears, which is now it was the last game of the season or whatever, but still 1-5. So, I know Packer fans, a little let down the way that ended. I get your division's good. Even an average year, you're going to win, split them 3-3. So you're an 11-win team with one divisional win. You add a couple more. You're much closer to me to 13 wins than you are 9. Like I think the Packers are going to be good. It would not shock me at all. Let's face it, there's a major question mark at quarterback in Minnesota. Their roster's awesome, but the quarterback, the chances that, I mean, what's Sam Darnold just throw 35, 36 touchdowns? Is JJ McCarthy going to do that? I mean, look at all these guys getting drafted off Michigan. I mean, honestly, Jim Harbaugh's team the last 2 years resembles something of
You know
Saban or
what's
Kirby Smart,
you
right?
know,
Or
you know
Ohio
what's
State.
interesting, John, as I look at this draft. So let's start with 21 Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Chargers, Green Bay. I'm going in order. Pittsburgh Chargers, Green Bay, Minnesota, Houston Rams, Baltimore, Detroit. Those are really good rosters. Washington at 29, then Buffalo, Kansas City, Philadelphia. The downside to Washington's year is they have a roster that should be drafting six. But Jayden Daniels was so
Yeah.
good. I mean, you look at all these rosters around Washington before and after, you're like, oh, those are top 12 rosters. Washington's probably like 21. So the downside to Jayden Daniels' success was, oh, crap. We could really. So Washington's going to be drafting at the end of all these rounds. Now, they got Jayden Daniels. Nobody's crying for him. But I do think their roster is closer to the Raiders, I would argue, than it is the teams that surround them. Philadelphia, Buffalo, Detroit, Baltimore, Rams, Minnesota, Green Bay, Chargers, Pittsburgh, even Denver's got a pretty good roster at 20. Tampa Bay at 19 does. So just a thought as I'm looking over the teams that remain. Minnesota is where.
Has to be one of the worst rosters in
Oh, I
recent
can't remember
memory
a
in
roster that
championship
bad.
game.
Being in a conference.
But that, and that's why it speaks to the power of coaching and quarterback play in the NFL. If you got those two things, you got a real chance. And obviously, Dan Quinn, coach of the year level, and Jayden, I mean, I don't know, one of the greatest rookie seasons we've ever seen. Now, they did add, now we'll see, is Debo shot? Does he have, one last season in him? You add Laramie Tunzel. I mean, they've added some veteran players instead of just buying
Yeah.
average guys in free agency. They said, yeah, we'll trade some mid-round picks for some potentially higher-end players that are veteran guys. So they've taken a different tactic utilizing Jayden Daniels' rookie contract. I think Debo's going to have a little bit of a fire lit under him, and Laramie Tunzel just, I mean, a flawed great player, but a pretty high end left tackle. So I think their roster is going to look much better, and I think Adam Peters is, I think he's a stud. So I'd expect
Minnesota takes Donovan Jackson. Offensive line for Ohio State by Buckeye standards because of the injuries and moving players out of position was not as good as average Ohio State lines. I mean, they won the Natty, but it felt like a lot of that was defense, wide receiver, running back. So Donovan Jackson, guard to Ohio State. I think we largely looked at this Minnesota team is one of the questions was we loved him everywhere, but the O-line. Again, I will never criticize teams for going O-line. I even the guys that miss. When the Jets a few years ago took a left tackle that had weight issues, Mekhi Becton, I'll never criticize you for going there. The right tackle for the Giants from Alabama appears to me a miss. I get it. So J.J. McCarthy's had injuries. Donovan Jackson, a guard, interior O-lineman. I mean, what's the first thing Chicago does? Drew Dahlman and Joe Tooney and Jonah Jackson. The first thing Ben Johnson does, he makes sure Caleb Williams' feet, center guard, will be safe. So Minnesota takes Donovan Jackson, Houston on the clock. So if you look at the draft right now, if I said to you, your favorite pick, and we're currently through 24, and I don't want to be a homer, but doesn't it feel like the Chargers getting Hampton, the running back at 22, is about as good as you're going to do in this draft? I mean, what does a steal mean? And again, it's hard to give out draft grades. I saw Scott Van Pelt laughing at people who give out draft grades. We don't know.
It's stupid.
But boy, at 22, does Omarion Hampton not feel like the value pick of the draft so far? Harbaugh out of last year. Joe Alt, who, by the way, Greg Roman told me, wait until you see Joe Alt. He goes, he's going to have an unbelievable season. He goes, people don't understand. Doesn't matter where you play. Left or right tackle. He goes, that is such a hard position first year in the NFL. These edge rushers, as you noted earlier, are so good. Greg was like, Joe Alt thought he had a terrible season. I'm like, Joe, you didn't. He goes, this is a really hard league to try to block edge rushers.
What's crazy is I was like, in my experience, guys that are that tall, 6'9", it's difficult for them to bend. And I remember when I first kind of dove into Alt and texted around, they're like, yeah, don't worry, he's an elite athlete. And I'm with you. I watched him last year. I was like, this is one of the better rookie tackles I can remember. I think all these picks like starting with the good teams, starting with Tampa. I mean, Denver, Barron. I think a lot of people think he's one of the better players in this draft. The Chargers, Hampton. I mean, Golden. People love this guy. He goes to the Packers. You want to list some wide receivers they've drafted over the years? Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson. They got a
Here
pretty
we
good
go.
history. So I just think all these guys are going to be impact players on good teams.
Well, the rumors and the reporting were right. The New York Giants make a trade with the Houston Texans, move up, and select Jaxson Dart, quarterback, Ole Miss. So I have somebody in this league I trust a lot. And he said that Brian Daboll really liked Jaxson Dart. I'm very cool on him, mostly because when I watched him against, I watched them play LSU, Bama, Georgia, Florida. Those are the games I watch with Ole Miss, like everybody else is watching on a Saturday. He wasn't spectacular. I mean, he's a good player. I don't think there's any question. He went to the same high school as Zach Wilson, ran the same offense. What I worry about is that Lane's offense, has a lot of stick routes, bubble screens, a lot of completions are built in, and Ole Miss has really good talent. I mean, Lane can really recruit quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. Lane's an elite recruiter. And I also think Lane is schematically is a well above average college coach. So I worry that Jaxson Dart, it's a lot of that stuff is built in, and he still in big games is completing 58, 59%. What do you hear and what do you make of Jaxson Dart?
When you meet someone that everyone likes, but you have a bad first impression, and you're like, I don't get it. Something's just off with this guy. My first time really diving into this guy was watching him against Florida, and he imploded at the end of the game and threw interceptions. I can't now. You and I remember watching him at USC that last year. I think Clay Helton was still the coach, right? And it was like, there's something there. But then he immediately transfers to Lane. Listen, physically, he's obviously has a talented arm, good little athlete. But that Florida game, in a game that was must win for them to get into the playoffs, and Ole Miss was like a legitimate
No.
playoff pick. People thought they were going to compete for the
Yes.
national championship. I think he had the number one portal class. They spent a bunch of money, and Dart just kind of let him down in some big games. I would say, when the season ends, you're thinking like third round. Like this guy is one of those guys that's going to get drafted on the second day, maybe become a starter. But to end up, the draft process was really good to him. He was a guy, we talk about risers, which I hate that sometimes, like this last week. No one's rising this last week. But over the course of the last couple months, coaches get to meet you. They get you on the board. They work you out personally. That's how you rise. Because I think it's fair to say when the season ended, if you just polled scouts that were going into Ole Miss, general managers that had watched them, this guy was not a first-round graded quarterback. And this is someone, Shedeur, some question marks, the way they handled everything. This is a guy that like tries to interview incredibly well, and I that can get you in trouble. So I'm with you. I think this is. I mean, what's he going to do? Start? It's not like he's going to play. He's not beating out, Russell Wilson. But is this a situation where if the Giants aren't that good, all of a sudden people are chanting his name in MetLife, and he's starting week 8, 9, or 10? And here's the other thing, Colin. When you trade up for this player, the new coaching staff coming in, if they don't win games, I mean, they have to make the playoffs to get contract extensions. What if they go 7-10 and they get fired, and the new coach has to inherit this guy that you just traded up to get? I mean, I don't know I don't know if they traded a future first round pick. They didn't have to, but it's not like they gave away nothing. So
Okay.
I don't know. I think these type moves are a little risky for my blood.
The Rams. So there were two beliefs with the LA Rams. They really like Colston Loveland, and they really liked Brock Bowers last year. So McVay, who has a history with tight ends, would like to get a tight end. But I had talked to Les Snead during the off season. I talked to him probably 2 months ago, and we just had a text exchange. And he said, listen, it wouldn't crush us if we moved out of the first round because they don't have a second round pick. So, yeah, hold on.
They traded with Atlanta. So the Giants traded with the Texans.
So the Falcons
And
at
then
26
the
take
Rams-
James Pierce, the edge from Tennessee. So Atlanta's had a lousy pass rush. forever. So I mean they have struggled with a pass rush. So that is predictable. Remember they got Matt Judon last year from the New England Patriots. They thought would help. So
Listen to this, Colin. Listen to what Les Snead just did. So they traded with the Falcons. Uh, they get their second round pick, which is pick 46. They get next year's
oh
first round pick.
Jesus. So the Rams have two
They
ones
get
next year.
year's. So the Rams now have. You said they did not have a second round pick. The Rams. So the Rams get a second round pick now, pick 46. That's their first pick of this draft, and they get next year's Falcons.
Wow. And that will be a top 15 pick.
You would think that seems to trade up to get James Pierce.
Holy
Colin, I think that's
Nikes.
I think that's insane. I mean some of these trades, Colin.
I don't understand that.
I can't wrap my mind around.
Hey,
I'm at a loss.
you
for
just
words.
got Atlanta's first round pick for James Pierce, the third to fourth best edge rusher in not a great edge rusher class. Jesus.
At least if you're trading a future first round pick and you get Travis Hunter, a guy that's never unprecedented what the guy just did, probably since leather helmets, someone playing.
So it was that you're looking at it.
I think it's crazy, but given a future first round pick to do it, like at least you could justify it in the room. James Pierce, decent rusher. I mean, at pick 25, you don't trade a future first round pick to trade up for a player in the 20s. That can't happen, especially a
Holy
D lineman.
God.
I mean, what defensive lineman is he off the board? 6 or 7? Think how many guys have already come off the board that all these teams passed on.
Jesus, Atlanta.
It'd be one thing if someone was falling because of like a Laramie Tunsil bong issue or something. You're like, well, this guy should have been the 4th pick in the draft. We're going all in. He's one of the most talented guys. That's crazy.
Well, also, so the Rams will have 2 number 1 picks next year. Theirs and Atlanta's. So you're going to probably get one that's a top 15 and one that's somewhere in the 20s. But remember, Stafford, there's a sense in the room Stafford's got 2 years with the Rams left. So next year is the year you would draft a quarterback, or later in this round. Later in this draft, like 4th round, Kyle McCord, Syracuse. Again, I feel like Cleveland took Jacksonville to the cleaners, and I feel like the Rams took Atlanta to the cleaners.
How often I don't
Jesus.
ever remember a team getting another team's first round
In a
pick
bad draft for
It
the
was
5th best edge rusher.
that was drafting 26. Usually when you accumulate those first round picks, you're drafting really, really high. That has to be a first in the internet era. I'm drafting 26 and I trade back and I get the team's first round pick. And I'm not trading a player, right? I'm not trading, for DK Metcalf or Tyreek Hill or something. I'm literally just trading you pick 26. Now the Rams also gave their 3rd round pick this year.
Well, they have 2 thirds and a
But
4th.
still.
So they have a second
So
now.
they
They have a
gave one of their
second, a
thirds.
3rd, a 4th, and 4 6s. They don't have a lot of needs, John. They need a corner, an inside linebacker. They could use a tight end and an offensive tackle. They have 4 needs.
And I understand that Sean and Raheem are good buddies, but that felt like taking advantage of everybody. Now, I do wonder for the GM Terry Fontenot, for Raheem Morris. I mean, that owner's mid-80s. He has unlimited amounts of money, and you've talked about this for a long time. These owners now in basketball and football are firing guys. Paying you $30 million away is couch change to them. I wonder if these guys pissed off the owner last year because they got over-aggressive with Cousins, and then they fell in love with Penix after, and then Cousins sucked. Now the owner's meeting with Cousins, because he's pissed off. He just gave him $90 million, and Cousins got a no-trade clause, so it's not easy to just deal him. He's kind of got them by the balls. And then they missed the playoffs last year. They hire the biggest staff in the league, and Raheem goes, well, we plan on losing coaches because he's acting like we're going to be really good. They go under 500. I wonder if that owner's like, you guys better win and win now. I don't know how much longer I have. There's pressure on you guys. This felt like one of those, like, there's pressure from
Well, I mean,
above.
the Giants are a bad football operation. They take Jaxson Dart, who very few people had as a first round prospect, and the Falcons make a weird move up. They get a first and a third, but they give up next year's number one and they give up a second, which, again, this is not a good draft. Last year was a great draft. Next year's supposed to be a significantly better draft. This is not a good draft. No, everybody's saying it. James Pierce will start for them. Will he star for them? Now, I understand it as well. They haven't had a pass rush in forever. I mean, they just don't get sacks. So, and they also Atlanta's drafted so many offensive players. I think the Falcons have drafted 4 straight years. Their first pick was an offensive player. So I do think they, the defensive side was the play for them.
I got no problem drafting defense. To me, I'm not trading a future first round pick to get, I don't know, the 5th or 6th or 7th defensive lineman off the board. I mean, this is in the 20s. I truly believe that's an unprecedented move. And I would imagine stats will come out over the next 24 hours that a team has come up from the mid-second round to the middle of the 20s and given especially for a non-quarterback. Maybe we have seen in the past a team trading back up for a quarterback from the second round, but James Pierce, I would imagine half the league had this guy as like a fringe first-round pick to begin with. Again, solid prospect, but to mortgage that much for one player?
By the way, the Ravens,
I don't know.
In a division with Joe Burrow, take Georgia safety Malaki Starks, which, by the way, with Kyle Hamilton, gives them 2 first-round safeties. You know what's funny about the safety position? The Rams really value it. Safety is one of those positions where a lot of the progressive teams in this league, Kansas City, a lot of these teams in the NFL now, some of these coaches now, there's kind of a rebirth on safeties and their value to the defense. I don't know why that is, but I know the Rams really think highly of it. Kansas City has shown they care about it. Ravens now have 2 first-round safeties. Again, these Georgia guys, just feels like to me the hit rate on Georgia guys is very high in the first round.
Yeah, I feel like all the guys from Georgia are going to be good in the pros. I think it's the explosion of the pass game. So you're helping out your corners with all these.
Did you see the Lions just paid their safety a fortune? Did you see that yesterday? They paid one of their safeties, not Branch. It was the other guy.
Yeah, so they have to cover tight ends. Well, we've never had more pass catching tight ends, and we just got 2 guys that were drafted in the top 15. So you got to cover that guy. Think how many running backs now. Forever there was 1 or 2 Marshall Faulks or LaDainian Tomlinsons. I feel like half the league are just, I'm never coming off the field starting running back, and I catch the ball. Derrick Henry's pretty rare. Well, who's covering that guy? Linebackers and the safety. So I'm covering tight ends. I'm covering running backs out of the backfield that both can turn into just elite receivers. And then I got to help my corners out against every single week. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. You just go through the list. So the passing games are so explosive. And this guy, Kyle Hamilton, the good safeties, Hufanga was like this. I have to help in run support and be a good tackler. They're just really, really valuable because you are taking linebackers off the field now with the spread offense, but these teams spread you out and then run the ball. I need that guy to kind of act as a linebacker. So I'm with you. I value middle linebacker and safety more than definitely some teams do because the teams with good players at those positions are usually pretty good on defense.
How about that? So Detroit.
This draft, I mean, these guys, Dart and the Pierce thing are a little
well,
weird,
it's the Giants.
The guard from Ohio State, good player. Golden, good player. Hampton, good player. Starks is a stud. I mean, these teams in the 20s, this is the best part about quote unquote average drafts is I think Eric DaCosta would tell you, yeah, we don't view that big of a difference at pick 26, 27 as the guy getting drafted.
I mean, the bottom line, Baltimore went and got a starter. And for a team like Baltimore, when you get down to these teams like Philadelphia, Kansas City, Buffalo, Detroit, Baltimore, Rams, John, there's not that many starting positions. Do you remember years ago when A.J. Smith was the GM of the Chargers and they had that 14-2 team, like 10 Pro Bowlers, and they gave up multiple draft picks for Eric Weddle, the safety from Utah, who had an unbelievable career. And I remember listening to A.J. Smith talk about it. He's like, we got 2 positions that any of these kids could start. He goes, we need a safety, and I forget the other position. But his point was, when you get to the bottom of this first round, These teams don't have a ton of holes. And so you look at Baltimore, when you think of Baltimore, they got their tight end now. With Zay Flowers, they have a wide receiver, they have their quarterback, they have their left tackle, their O-line is fine. They've got a pass rush. And I mean, I think they look at it and they think to themselves, Georgia safety, big hitter. I mean, just these Georgia guys almost all work.
Yeah, I think when you look at the good teams, they typically cut 4 or 5 guys that immediately get claimed September 1st. So they have more of a 53-man roster. Their roster, because you're not going to cut your first and second and third round picks typically. You're going to cut guys that I remember when I first got into radio and was going to Harbaugh's team. It was like 2013. Greg Roman would have been on that staff. I think they had 8 guys claimed. So they had a roster that they kept, and obviously it was the peak Harbaugh 49ers that had 53 NFL guys. And then they had 8 or 7 guys immediately get claimed to other teams, and some of those guys became starters. So they have a roster, the Ravens, the Eagles, the Chiefs. They actually have like 60 or 61 NFL players. Some teams, the bad teams, and they're like, yeah, I guess we got to keep this guy. They probably got like mid-40s guys
Right.
They feel comfortable. So it's a huge, it's the difference of the
Look
good
at Philadelphia
and the bad
right
teams.
now.
And
Philadelphia's got 6 to 7 guys who aren't starting. I mean, look at their O-line and D-line depth for the Eagles alone.
Yeah. They're going to be, if they stay relatively healthy, to me, the only question mark is, the new offensive coordinator. But roster-wise, it's about as, if they end up getting Will Johnson.
Well, look at this. If I said to you, shaky Miami gets Kenneth Grant at 13. Baltimore gets Malaki Starks at 27. And if I said to you, one of those two guys has a big rookie year, I would take Starks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
sure. The Ravens defenders from the best program, it's going to work. Playing next to one of the better young players in the NFL. It's those two guys. The Ravens just need Lamar to have some good playoff games because you could argue even last year, they were better than the Bills.
Right.
They had a better team, but they lost the game. Obviously, 2 years ago, they're at home. They are kind of in this window. They draft so well. They got this quarterback in the peak of their powers. We will look back. Thank God, Jokic and Giannis won an NBA championship because they might never win one again, but at least they got it. The Ravens have this window right now. And it's not, they play the other two teams good too. It's not like they're intimidated by the Bills or the Chiefs. It's like, this is your time. And it's their roster. I don't know. Their team is just, how do they draft so well? And they're always picking like 28 to 30.
Well, and I think, again, they are such a good roster. They went and remember a couple years ago, they got Linderbaum, the center, and then Kyle Hamilton, the safety.
Yeah.
And their takeaway was, well, they would start for us. Again, they had probably 4 positions you could, and then because they can go they always go and acquire a starter in free agency or 2. And then with teams like Baltimore, there may be only 2 players you can draft. So they went and got a center and a safety. They both end up being terrific players, but a lot of people don't think centers and safeties, are first-round draftable players. Well, they are if you're Baltimore. So Detroit gets defensive tackle from Ohio State. Talik Williams, their defensive line at Ohio State was really good. On projections, a position, Aiden Hutchinson comes back. They want an interior defensive lineman who was a great run stopper. Talik Williams, defensive tackle, Ohio State. So he had one of the wider variances for a first-round pick. He had early third, mid-second. They get him, Detroit does, at 28. I'm reading his draft profile here. Boy, it's all over the great, one of the top 10 run stuffers in this draft. That's need.
Well, think about their division. You got, the Minnesota Vikings, Aaron Jones, a good running back. The Green Bay Packers, Jacobs, one of the better backs in the league. And the one thing they know about Ben Johnson is he's going to want to run the ball, right, and be physical at the line of scrimmage. And they got a good offensive line improved. So I think last year when they had all those injuries, that their defensive line, obviously once Aiden broke his leg, but they lost so many other guys. They had nothing to
Yeah.
hold the point. So to me, they just needed some more big bodies. And the one thing you would say about Dan Campbell, I mean, those two guys, him and Holmes, resurrected. I mean, what? One of the most putrid franchises in the history of sports. They are a real operation now. I feel pretty confident about like they know. Last year they drafted Arnold from Alabama. This year they go Ohio State. Like they don't veer far from the
Right.
top programs. So they're not trying to outthink the room here. They're not like, let's take this overachiever from UC Davis. Like they're just sticking kind of on the Howie Roseman plan. Let's take the better players from
Yes.
the bigger programs. And it's not easy to draft. I mean, they've been good now a couple years in a row. It's much easier to nail picks when you're drafting 10th than when you're drafting
Right.
26th,
Well,
right?
and the thing about Williams was he was a really good player. He didn't have like a great combine, which I don't really hold it against the guy. I mean, we have some teams now that don't go to the combine, some coaches. He was a really productive player. So he was viewed as a second round pick. Again, you get down. I made this argument with Jason McIntyre. If you go to the grocery store and your wife asks you to get eggs, bread, and milk, and you come back with a rake and you said, yeah, but I got great value on it. Well, we don't need a rake. We have one. Like sometimes you just have to draft what you need. And let's say on Detroit's board, they had him as the 36th best player and they're drafting 28. Well, what do you do? This offense needs no help. I mean, they're stacked offensively.
Yeah.
So they were going to draft defense. And my take is they don't need an edge rusher. So I've always wondered about that. When you're Detroit 28, he may be your 36th rated player. But if you don't take a defensive lineman here, John, you're not drafting until deep into the woods tomorrow. And Detroit could look at the draft and go, well, 4 defensive tackles are going to be off the board, the 4 we like by the time we draft tomorrow. So when you were working with Andy in Philadelphia, are there times that you do reach simply because of need and you look and think, well, we don't want to trade up tomorrow, and the 4 guys at this position that we really like will all be gone by the time we draft tomorrow?
Well, you also got to factor in, let's just say, in their backyard, the Michigan corner might be their highest graded guy. Well, last year, our first 2 picks was Arnold and Rackestraw. They used pick 24 and 61 last year on 2 DBs from the SEC. So you have to factor in guys from last year. Obviously, Arnold's a starter, but these guys like going to factor more in. Where do we need help? So yeah, I mean, I think you have to factor in need when you draft at the end of the first round, and you have to base it on last year, what you invested in on the draft, and how you feel those guys can take a big step. That's a hard balance to do. So you might have guys like, hey, this guy was on our practice squad last year, but we think we might need a linebacker, but we actually think he might have a chance to start. So you gotta factor in the big picture view of the roster, and then obviously what you do
Okay,
in free
so
agency.
this is not surprising to me at all. I know the Rams like this player. Josh Connerly Jr., the offensive tackle for Oregon, goes to Washington. So I had said this on the show a couple of times last week and this week, is that if you're Washington and you look at Philadelphia, who you have to play twice a year, and you look at the Eagles' O-line and D-line, so you get Debo with McLaurin and Jayden Daniels. So you've got weapons. You got to fix those O and D lines. You're not beating Philadelphia. And so to me, Connerly's a kid that went, I think it was Rainier High in Seattle. It came down to USC and Oregon. USC thought they had him. This was the beginning of the NIL, and Oregon paid about, $300,000-400,000 to get him. He was the best left tackle by far on the West Coast. He went to Oregon. He played as a freshman. The one thing I'll say about him, great body, but he just got better every year at Oregon. He was really young when he got there, but they played him early. And he got better and better. And so I know the Rams liked him. I'll tell you this. This is one of my favorite picks in the last 5 picks. I really like this pick because again, I think first of all, I think you get some value. I mean, he's gonna play. He's an ascending player. Played against real competition. Oregon in the Big Ten played against really good competition. And, Oregon, let's be honest about it. Oregon recruits at an elite level over the last 10 years. Oregon practice. Now, they don't have Ohio State players. This is a really good pick. And it's the right position.
Well, to me, it's a little bit of a, at the end of the 20s, how do you get I don't want to say a project, but he's
He's young.
an upside guy who's not ready to be like the Pats weren't going to take him at pick 4, but he's one of the more athletic guys in the class at the position. You just get Tunzel. So in the last month, they had Laramie Tunzel in their first round pick as a tackle. So ideally, maybe this guy depends if you extend Tunzel and he's your left tackle, you put this guy at right tackle. Maybe you just use Tunzel this year and you realize you don't want him, you bump this guy over to left tackle. It gives you optionality, but I never have an issue with, like you said, with the Becton pick, taking swings on guys 6'5", 320 pounds that are blue chip kids. Obviously you got to do your homework on the guy and their work ethic, and toughness is huge at offensive and defensive line, especially offensive line, like how tough you are. But it's, you play for Dan Lanning and Mario these last couple of years. Like, that's an intense program. I mean, so you go there,
Yeah.
they played at a high level. I think you got to see a new level of toughness with Ohio State. Really, or at Oregon these last couple of years. The Pac-12 was excellent 2 years ago, and this year at Oregon playing in the Big Ten. I mean, you got a couple years worth of film playing at a really high level in some massive games. So yeah, I mean, I thought this guy at the Senior Bowl, there was talk about him potentially being in the mix for like a top 15 pick. So sometimes, other position guys go, obviously some wide receivers and defensive linemen
Once
push him
once
down.
those
But
honestly, once those tight ends were gone, this is who I thought the Rams, if they didn't get a tight end, this is who I thought the Rams would take. I know they liked him.
I just think you get to a point where if someone knocked on my door right now and offered me triple what my house is worth, I'd be like, I'll be out tomorrow. That's what the Rams, I think the Rams felt pretty good about taking a player kind of in this group that just got drafted, these last couple guys, but they just got an offer they couldn't say no to. And this is where, when you have stable organizations like Les Snead and Sean McVay, the only reason they go somewhere is Sean McVay would go choose to do Amazon. Like, he's not going anywhere. You can make these bigger picture moves, because there would be some teams in their spot. It's like, you got this valuable pick, right? You have a first round pick. There are players that can help you. You got Matt Stafford, you're living year to year. It'd be easy to justify it. Listen, they're offering us a ton, but we're trying to win the Super Bowl this year. No one would have blamed them if they would have taken a player right there. But they're like, for the health and the big picture of the organization, this is 100% the right move. The Rams have done an incredible job these last 2 years of like staying focused on winning and a competitive team while balancing this restructure of a roster. It's pretty unheard of, kind of how they've did. Now they've had Stafford. If they would have had a middle tier, lower tier
Well, I mean,
quarterback,
McVay
they
and
would have been in some
Stafford, you
trouble.
could
But
argue after Andy,
yeah, pretty powerful
after
combo.
Andy Reid and Mahomes, they're probably the second best combo in the league.
Yeah, I would agree, especially when you factor in he's the play caller. So they are. I mean, let's face it, the Eagles handled the Packers. They obviously, them versus Washington was not a fair fight, and they dominated the Super Bowl. There was one team in the playoffs that gave them a run for their money, and
Yes.
it was the Rams. And for a team, we give the Dolphins a lot of shit for being this warm weather climate. They can't travel, and it's true. History speaks for itself. The Rams should fall under that as well. I mean, what's the weather on a daily basis?
They had the ball
80
to
degrees,
15.
beautiful. Yet they built
They had
this
the ball
tough
to
team.
15-yard line, first down, to beat the Eagles in Philadelphia in a snowstorm. They had the ball. They just couldn't block Jalen Carter on back-to-back. I think it was back-to-back snaps, because they had Bo Limmer, who was like a 6th-round Arkansas draft pick at center, which was the weakest spot in their own line. And they, that was you needed an all-pro center to block. But I mean, they had Philadelphia again up against the ropes. Remember that big completion to Puka Nacua down
Big
the
time.
sideline? You're like,
Oh,
holy shit, they're going to walk out of here and beat Philadelphia.
well, think about what they've done is the type players that they have drafted over the years: Aaron Donald, Puka Nacua, Cooper. Uh, you know, they just draft guys that would have thrived in like the AFC North, right? They just happened to play Stafford. I mean, Stafford could have played in any climate throughout his career. So yeah, I mean, I think the Rams. I think they just got an offer. I would imagine they went into the day planning on taking one of the guys in this group that gets drafted in the 20s, and they got a phone call that blew them away. I would have said yes to.
Okay, the Bills take Maxwell Harrison. He's a cornerback from Kentucky. It's a position of need. I don't think there's any question about that. They have to get better at corner. Also, if you're going to get past, Kansas City and Mahomes and Reed and Joe Burrows, and you start looking at some of these quarterbacks in the AFC, you better be better and deeper at corner.
Why would they invite Jalen Milroe to the draft when he's not going to get drafted in the first round. I saw his comment saying that I just want to hear my name called. It'd be cool. I get why he would go, even if he goes in the third round. It has to be a cool experience. But I don't understand why the NFL would draft a guy that was not going to go in the first round. I mean, honestly, he's not even a lock. He'll probably go in the second
I
round,
don't
but
know. Yeah,
he could just be
you
on
know,
the.
it's people really like him. Um, I mean, I think the story of the first round is Shedeur Sanders didn't get drafted because Kansas City's not taking him and Philadelphia's not taking him. So, I mean, I think our story of the first round is Shedeur Sanders. You know, again, I don't love him. I think he's a B prospect, but I'm in a quarterback driven league where about 7 teams need quarterbacks. I'm surprised.
I could see the Raiders in the second round taking him. The Jets signed Fields, but I
That's not going to work.
thought
With
that
a
was a lot of
defense,
money to
by
get
the way,
Fields. No,
Fields
so
had a defensive coach in Chicago, defensive coach, where'd he go? In Pittsburgh, defensive coach, rookie defensive coach with the Jets. Like Justin Fields, I don't think he was ever going to be great. That's not a fair shot. Like he's never had an offensive culture. Chicago, Jets from Pittsburgh. Like Justin Fields.
what if somehow Shador fell to Dallas in the second round and they pulled the trigger?
I think nobody will say this out loud, but this is the second surgery, lower body surgery for Dak Prescott. Okay, he was never hyper athletic to begin with. I thought the last time he played, Dak was absolutely a pocket quarterback. That's
Oh
what he
yeah.
was. He was much closer to Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins than he was Bo Nix and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen.
Did Dak say this when they reported, or did Schottenheimer say like he's not ready to go in OTAs from this injury, the hamstring injury? Like he's not even like if they played a game in a month, he couldn't play. I mean that so the ankle once it shattered, like you said, he was never even close to the
Nope.
same mobility. Which
But
he's a
by the way,
solid
John,
pocket quarterback, but this injury is a pretty big deal. I mean, how often do guys
and
tear their
also,
hamstring?
Aaron Rodgers was an elite pocket quarterback, and so was Kirk Cousins. So you can live with them having a reduction in mobility. Dak's never been, he's never been a strong armed, effortlessly accurate
No.
quarterback. Dan Mullen, his college coach, laughs about it. I talked to him, now he's at UNLV, he used to be at Florida, he was at Mississippi State. He's like, well, when we got Dak, it was about the intangibles, the man, the player, the toughness. He still never threw a good ball. Like we never thought he threw a pretty ball. So the fact that, I don't think Shedeur to the Cowboys is crazy. Now, it would obviously create an S storm, and they've got far greater needs than that.
First time head coach too. I don't know if even Jerry would have to probably, cooler heads would have to prevail and be like, I don't know
I
if we
think,
even want
honestly,
to
the
do this,
Cowboys are
but
going to go tight end. That's my guess. Tight end or running.
I think running back.
Javonte
Yeah,
Williams
I think
came there
running
from
back.
Denver, so they've got a 2 at running back. Can they find I mean, listen, Travion Henderson for Ohio State, in my opinion, now maybe the best player available.
He could go to the Chiefs here at 32. The Eagles and the
I bet you
Chiefs.
that too. Kansas City
I wonder if
takes.
they're. I think the Eagles and the Andy and Howie were just bored because they just traded with each other, 31
Really?
to 32. So they flip flop picks. Andy, I think historically he's made a trade in every draft for like 25 years, and Howie
Well,
loves
it's
to
funny
trade. So
because that's really funny.
I could see the Chiefs taking the Ohio State running back.
But you
for
said
sure.
Philadelphia just moved to 31.
Yeah, they're picking 31. It wouldn't shock me if they take the Michigan
Will
corner here.
Johnson.
I mean, what do the Eagles really need? I mean, they
I,
just take whoever their
by the
best player on
way,
the board is.
is that going to be funny if the Eagles get Will Johnson, who was viewed by most as the best corner, and they just hit on 2 corners last year? Let me tell you something. Nobody in this league has 3 good corners. Nobody in this league has 3 good corners. If they get Will Johnson, Philadelphia is the only team in the league that has that.
Well, they got 3 good corners, and then they would have probably the best young pass rusher in the NFL. Definitely interior pass rusher in Jalen Carter. Nolan Smith
One of the
really came
most
on.
active
So
linebackers.
with, I don't know, the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league in Vic Fangio. And their entire offense is all making minimum $20 million and a
Let's
bunch of Pro
predict. Let's
Bowlers.
do it right now for fun. We won't edit this out. I think Philadelphia takes Will Johnson and Kansas City takes Travion Henderson. That's my guess.
I will agree with you there. Will Johnson's going one of these next two picks.
Well, and the other
my
thing
guess for
is,
sure. I could see the Chiefs. Remember, they took the little running back from LSU, Burrow's year, Clyde.
but he's not
they had just
he
won the
didn't
Super Bowl. No, I know, but I do wonder if they've Andy had success historically. They got Shady in the second round. Like they have taken, but I think in this draft, Hendrickson, I mean,
dude,
he made a lot of plays.
Yeah, the
down
kid
stretch.
from
He
LSU
could
was
fly.
not, I didn't think he was a wildly dynamic home run back.
He was more of a. I think they viewed him more as like
Yes,
a pass
he
catcher,
was.
kind of like a Brian
That's what he
Westbrook,
was.
a young version of that, and it just didn't work. But they do need you would like the one thing Philly has is just playmaker. I mean, they're just like, yeah, Dallas Goedert, someone take him. We'll just draft the tight end in the second or third round because we got to save a little money here because we only got one football to go around. But they are so loaded on offense. Where you look at Philly, you got Rice who's going to come off this injury. You got Xavier Worthy who came on at the end, but Kelsey's. I mean, he's a postseason player at most now, so they need some pop. Running back, they were playing with Kareem Hunt, toward the end of the season when, they had some injuries. So I'd be stunned if the Chiefs don't go with a playmaker.
Well, they're going to get Rashee Rice back, who would really have developed into a one before he got hurt.
But that was a pretty big. I mean, Mahomes, he took him out. I mean, that was a pretty bad knee injury. His leg snapped. I'm with you. He was healthy. He was a really, really good player. I mean, God, might be on the biggest heater of any GM in his recent drafts. Quinnen Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter, Nolan
Jesus.
Smith, Jordan Davis. I mean, they haven't missed on many picks, and it showed.
If I said to you, what draft picks and what moves didn't you love? We would probably say we didn't love what Jacksonville did. We didn't love what Miami did. We didn't love what Atlanta did trading up with the Rams. I mean, isn't it predictable? Isn't it? And if I said to you, what are some of the steals? Well, you'd say to yourself, Jim Harbaugh getting a star running back at 22 is a steal. Malaki Starks, Baltimore at 27 is a damn good pick. And it looks like if they do what we think, Jesus.
They took Jahad Campbell, the linebacker.
Oh, Philadelphia did?
Who's a pretty good player, too.
Now, he's the best linebacker. He's kind of a freak athlete.
I do think they lost. I forget whether it was in the Packer game or it might have been the Washington game. Remember, Nakobe Dean, the Georgia linebacker, had a bad injury, a really bad knee injury. So I wonder, they re-signed Zach Bond. Here's the other thing Howie has done now 4 or 5 years in a row. They have basically just drafted from Alabama and Georgia in their first couple picks. Last year was a little bit of an outlier with the corner from Toledo, but again, he was like Ashton Jeanty. He could have left NIL.
I think
kind of
Jahad Campbell, I'd argue right now, this is probably the best value pick. A lot of people saw him as going somewhere like 18 to 26. They got him at the 31st pick. That's a pretty damn good pick.
I think Jahad Campbell and Malaki Starks are two guys that if Malaki Starks and Campbell had been offensive guards or wide receivers, they would have been top. They were two of the better players in this draft, but their positions, kind of drop them down. If you told me that Campbell was a pass rusher, not like a stand-up linebacker, he's going.
Well, he's athletically.
So they kind of you get discriminated against given your position.
God, they are going to be. They are so. They are.
They got
oh
a lot
my
of talent.
God. Yeah, I mean.
Them and the Ravens are just, every time they just get these high-end elite players from the best programs that will just knock your block off. That's the other thing. They aren't getting, there's nothing soft about these players they acquire. The Eagles have kind of morphed in to the Ravens in terms of their physical mentality. I mean, the Eagles have always had talent from Andy, even through the Howie run. But I think these last 3 or 4 years, the physical presence of their football team, it's a little like the Harbaugh 49ers and Pete Carroll Seattle Seahawks of just you better buckle up when you play these guys because they're going to hurt you. I mean, Sirianni, pretty lucky. He just gets to coach a team full of all-stars.
God, how he gets the best linebacker in that draft with the 31st pick.
I could see the Chiefs going Will Johnson here, or the wide receiver, or I mean the running back from Ohio State. I do think if you're Philly, or I mean Kansas City, I mean your division. I mean it's going to be hard. You know they benefited for a while. The Raiders were a joke. You know the Chargers just kind of always went cheap with coaches, and you know the Broncos have had a lot of turmoil post Peyton Manning. I mean, this division feels. I mean, Pete Carroll's a Hall of Famer. He's coaching the Raiders. You got Jim and Sean Payton, two of the highest paid coaches in the league, and they were two playoff teams. And this is really going to test the Chiefs over the next couple of years. Of they're going to need to keep nailing draft picks and need to probably make some tough decisions. Like how long can you? You know, Chris Jones is an elite player when he wants to be, but he's half the games he's not trying as hard. You know, Travis Kelce's kind of. They're going to need their second iteration of a group like New England had during Belichick and Brady, right? And they had three, but you're going to need to have a new crop of. You're going to need to get your next Chris Jones, your next Travis Kelce to be the core guys with Patrick over the next 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, Howie gets the best linebacker, 31st pick. Once again, goes to an SEC heavyweight to get him. Rinse and repeat. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Depending on who Kansas City takes with the 32nd pick, if Henderson, the Ohio State running back, does not go, he is the best player to start the second round. He is
to me the Titans when you
have
all
to
over
be.
him. I mean, I think you go skill guy to go around Cam Ward to help him out. You already got Ridley on the roster.
I mean, the fact that he is. I mean, he is a home. All three of these running backs, the top three running backs, these are home run running backs. These are guys that can. These guys can. You know, Najee Harris is a guy that he just doesn't have many career runs over 25 yards. He just doesn't have many. It's one thing in college, but in the NFL, you got to outrun corners and safeties to get loose. Jeanty, Hampton, and Henderson, those are home run backs. Those guys break long runs regularly. So this is an insane running back draft. I told you, I said this. Woody Marks is USC's most versatile running back since Reggie Bush. He's a terrific back. He will not be one of the top 12 to 13 running backs taken. And he was to me, I mean, on any given Saturday, he was USC's best player. I mean, I thought
I saw a headline that recruiting's going a little bit better for
2026 class is number one. Their NIL is up to like 18 million.
Positive
Yeah,
vibes.
they're buying high school players.
Yeah.
And they're buying
good. Here's the Chiefs. They took the offensive lineman from Ohio State. That's one thing, Andy. I think there were some question marks about the person. Not a bad guy, but I think Andy's history that they will take some flyers on talent, and that's this is the guy that got injured during the season. I mean, I think he was viewed as a top 10 or whatever player.
I mean, it was there. There was a time when he got banged up. There was real concerns for Ohio State. I mean, they did lose to Michigan, who had two elite defensive linemen. So Henderson's available at the top of the second. I think Tennessee, boy, that would be a strong pick by them. So there you have it. Shedeur Sanders does not get picked. Wow.
Looking at these names, Colin, a lot of Big Ten, a lot of SEC here in the
no.
in the
I mean,
first round.
this is who are we kidding? I mean, this is what Fox and ESPN, who now have major control in college football, wanted college football to look more like the NFL. Two major conferences. And so now they've extended that. What is the playoff now? 14 teams. And so, my take is you're going to get 8 of those at least from the big dogs. And so, I mean, it's who are we kidding here? I mean, you watched.
I mean, listen to this stretch. starting at 9, because the first round, the first couple
Yeah.
picks had
Yeah.
Colorado and Boise State. Texas, Michigan, Georgia, Bama, Michigan, Penn State, Georgia, Ole Miss, A&M, guard from North Dakota State, which I'm sure would have started at those power programs. They probably tried to buy him. Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, North Carolina, Texas, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Kentucky, who had a good defense, Bama, Ohio State.
So when you're arguing that Indiana absolutely needs to be in the playoff, it's like, folks, this is what drives me nuts about the college football media. And I know a lot of these guys. Stop. 6 programs if LSU's now a little bit because of their NIL, LSU's a bit down in terms of talent, but generally there's like 6 programs. And the fact that Notre Dame now is recruiting at an elite level, folks, there's like 6 programs every year that just have better players. Sark now at Texas, as long as he's there, they're going to have top 4 players in the country. Ohio State, Georgia, Kalen DeBoer is a great recruiter. Brian Kelly banged the drum, so they have some NIL money. But everybody's always trying to argue SMU. And God, stop it. Look at this talent. It's all Big Ten SEC.
And even the one guy that I think had a run with guys up here is kind of falling off a little bit, and it shows they're not quite as good as Clemson. Clemson,
they don't do
used to be a
portal
program that was right there. No, I mean what Kirby's really turned his program into what Saban was in his peak.
Yeah. John Middlekauff. Great 2 hours, bud.
What a night.